of the different constitutional types or the different energies that we have when we come to the mat, if we want to have a practice that brings our Vata down, that reduces our Vata, and we might want to do this type of practice, a Vata reducing practice, if we're traveling or if we're under a lot of stress, if we've had trauma, if we've had loss. Those are all reasons that Vata would be high in the body. We'd be experiencing more change, more space, more movement in that space. Or if Vata's high, because that's our constitution, and maybe we're in Vata season, maybe we're in that fall season, we might want to come to the mat and decrease our Vata. So some of the most basic ways, remember that Vata is in the colon. So this is a forward fold, standing forward fold, Uttanasana. It's one of the best practices for Vata because we're compressing the air out of the colon. The colon it's very, because it can get filled with air, because it can get filled with gas, it can feel very light right in the root of our body. And simply by folding ourselves in half, the warmth of the third chakra starts to compress against the upper legs. And in that insulation, there's a warmth, there's a groundedness, and we start to feel a little bit more safe, a little bit more protected. The other thing that happens in a forward bend is if it's done correctly, the top of the shin bone goes forward, and the top of the femur bone, here's the kneecap, the top of the femur bone goes back. And when the femur bone goes back, the pelvic floor starts to open up. The femur bones go back, and if they go apart, the pelvis starts to open, and energy that was maybe trapped and going upwards, remember energy from Vata goes up and out, well, that energy starts to reverse, and it starts to flow down into the bowl of the pelvis and down more into the legs. And often after a good Vata pacifying practice, a person might actually release a lot of gas. It maybe even release fecal matter and just feel like, oh, I'm grounded. That energy that was stuck has now released. So standing forward bends, also standing poses, like even simple Warrior Two, and maybe the hands will just be on the hips, and that'll be a much more grounded way to do Warrior. The attention is going to go downward. Always with Vata reducing practices, we want our gaze as well to go downward. We want to look down, we want to move our energy down, we want to pulsate, and we want to just allow ourselves to feel the earth beneath our feet. So forward bends, standing poses, sitting forward bends, where we spread our legs apart, we bow forward, we might touch our feet or the floor in front of us, and then hip openers, like doing poses like pigeon, where we're bowed forward over our front leg, right? We're in a standing, we're in a forward fold over our front leg in pigeon pose. And that just starts to allow the hips to open again, the pelvis spreads, the energy is now able to go more from crown into root, and that's very grounding and balancing to Vata. On the opposite side of the spectrum, again, these are like tertiary opposites. So we have like a Kapha reducing practice. Because Kapha is naturally grounded, we're going to want to move energy up to reduce Kapha. So a Kapha reducing practice might look like a lot of sun salutations, Surya Namaskar, where we're moving quickly and we're breathing deeply. We might then go to the wall and kick up into handstand. And we might be at handstand for a while. If we're a more advanced practitioner, we might go between handstand and Pincha Mayurasana, where we're on forearm balance now at the wall. And we might do this a few times and go back and forth, and then throw some sun salutations in and go back and forth. And then we might end up doing some chest openers, and we might start in bridge pose, and then we might press up into Urdhva Dhanurasana and do some back bends. And after that we might do some standing poses to actually help us warm down. So we might do standing poses in a grounding, cooling way. That's not that energized towards the end of practice, if practice has been very rajasic, very energizing, and more aggressive. So what I want you to see here is that we've tipped the energy upside down and we've worked this person out and we've bent them open in another way. Kapha accumulates in the lungs and it's heavy. By going upside down and bending backwards, it opens the lung tissues up. It starts to open up the pathway so the person can breathe. The person can feel light again instead of so heavy and weighed down. So after a kapha reducing practice, the person will feel energized and alert and vibrant. Now let's talk about in the middle, a pitta reducing practice. So remember, pitta is heat and it gets focused. It goes upwards and inwards naturally. So the kind of practice we want for a pitta is probably one that's going to start to diffuse the energy away from the center. Again, pitta accumulates in the small intestine, in its part of the liver, the gallbladder, the bile ducts, small intestine. It's all in that area, and there's a lot of heat. There's a lot of bile. There's a lot of intensity with pitta, and that heat rises up. It creates focus, and it has more of that arrow shape. So using that mental picture in a pitta reducing practice, we want our energy to go downward, and we also want our energy to go outward. So those are the directional flows. And how we might do that is simply, one, tuning into the breath in a way that's just grounding, in a way that's diffusive to the mind. So the mind isn't now thinking, the mind is just latching onto the breath. It's following the breath. It's no longer leading. And that's a very important attitude shift for pitta. It's really the attitude of surrender or letting go. Now, certain poses start to open up the area around the small intestine. In particular, poses, say again you do a Surya Namaskar, you do sun salutations or standing poses, but you might do them slowly and with less intensity. And Pittas sometimes hate this because they love intensity. In the same ways that Vatas will have a hard time going into a slow, still practice, and Kaphas will have a hard time going into a very energetic, rajasic practice. Pitta types will have a hard time slowing down and doing something with less intensity. Okay, certain poses like where you're lying on your belly and looking up, or even mini cobra poses. So your arms might be in front of you, like Superman, or you might just be on your forearms. And what that does is it stimulates this section right around the small intestines, and it stimulates the section right around the gallbladder and the liver. And it's doing so in a grounded and spacious way. Then also doing some of the back bends, but not necessarily full Surya Namaskar, but maybe just bridge pose, where you're starting to simply open this area of the body so that energy can start to move out. So we have the different Shalambasanas and Cobra. Also doing hip openers and shoulder openers will start to open the four corners of the body for the energy that gets stuck in the middle for Pitta, for that energy to start to flow. So if we take Purvottanasana, where we're, sorry, the head's here. Purvottanasana, where we're looking this way, and here's our butt, and we've just lifted our hips up, and we're on our hands and we're on our feet, and it opens the shoulders and it opens the hips. It allows the area around the intestines to start to open and feel a lot more spacious, and that starts to diffuse Pitta. Also, pigeon pose, the forward bends, those are all great for diffusing Pitta. And the seated pose is similar to Vata, where we bow forward and open the backs of our legs up, open our hips up. That starts to diffuse the energy. And you can just imagine, if all the energy's in the head, and you start to do a lot of poses that open up the hips and open up the backs of the legs, that will bring the energy back down into the hips, and the person will experience a lot more balance. So I hope this is helpful in terms of understanding. It's not just that Vata should only do forward bends and standing poses and hip openers, and Kaphas are the only ones who get to do handstands and back bends. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just asking, what do you need from your practice today? If you've been traveling a lot or there's a lot of trauma in your life, go with a Vata reducing practice. If there's been a lot of focus and intensity in your life, go with a Pitta reducing practice. If you've been very sedentary, you're gaining weight, you're feeling congested, go with a Kapha reducing practice.